Hello, and welcome to our webinar, Audio for All. I'm Heather Booth. I'm the audio section editor at Booklist. Before we begin, I'd like to go over some technical details. Links to today's slide presentation and title list were included in the reminder email you received from Zoom 1 hour ago. To download them, please open that email, scroll to the bottom, and click on the links located there. You can also download the slides and title list by copying the URLs on this screen into your web browser. If you have any trouble, please contact us at webinars@booklistonline.com. The audience is in listen-only mode, but we welcome any questions you may have. On the bottom of your screen is a toolbar with a section for Q&A. If you have a question or if you need technical assistance, simply click the Q&A and type your message into the box that appears. We will do our best to respond to all tech-related questions, and we'll pass along all other questions to today's panelists so they can follow up with you after the webinar. Finally, Booklist offers closed captioning on all webinars. To enable or disable captions on your screen, please look for and click the live transcript icon on the toolbar mentioned earlier. From there, you can select show or hide subtitles from the menu that appears. If you choose to enable subtitles, you can adjust the size of the captions at any time by selecting subtitle settings. Today, we have the pleasure of hearing from Michelle Cobb, the Sales Director for LA Theater Works and Executive Director for the Audio Publishers Association, Anita Ragnathan, Digital Marketing Associate at ECW Press, Angie Cornett, the Vice President of Graphic Audio, and Leah Kleynhans, Senior Producer and Chief Operating Officer at Deyan Audio. First up, we'll hear from Michelle Cobb. As well as being the Audio Sales Director for LA Theater Works and Executive Director for the Audio Publishers Association, Michelle is a partner at Forte Business Consulting, which provides business development and association management services for the publishing industry. Thanks for joining us today, Michelle.
Thanks for having me. All right, so I am going to start off talking a little bit about what's happening in audio in general. So if we take a look at some surveys that we have put together from the Audio Publishers Association, this includes 3 different surveys: the consumer data survey that we did earlier this year with Edison Research, then Edison's own share of ear survey, and then finally, the Audio Publishers Association sales survey, and this is data from 2021, and we partner with InterQ on that. All right, so what did we find with all of these surveys? Well, the news is great. Audio continues to grow. We've seen 10 years of double-digit growth in a row, and this year we had 25% revenue growth. So the future is looking bright. All right, what else have we seen? Well, why? Why is it looking so good? In part because we're offering so many different types of titles to so many different types of consumers. So in 2006, just 15 years ago, we only did about 3,000 titles as an industry. Now we record about 74,000 titles. So this gives more choices and entices more people into the format, which is all part of that great cycle of growth. All right, let's look at some of our key findings from various surveys. The share of ear, and this is a daily survey that Edison does, has shown a ton of growth in the audio space. So people are listening to more audiobooks. They are, they've doubled the amount of time that they've listened in the last 5 years. And people who listen to audiobooks are heavy listeners in many different realms, including doing podcasts and radio listening, all of that together. They listen to 2 more hours per day than the general consumer. All right, let's see what's coming up from all the details about our consumer listeners. Well, we're continuing to see that the average age of the listener is going down, but overall, more people are listening. So in 2022, 45% of adults, consumers 18 and up, said that they had ever listened to an audiobook. And one of the big changes we've seen in the last 2 years is that parents are encouraging their kids to listen more. Everyone wanted to get away from screens. So in 2022, 61% of parents said their children were listening to audiobooks, and just 2 years prior, that was only 35%. And one of the big things that we know, we love human voice recordings, and our listeners do say that they prefer professional narrators over author-read books. And this makes sense in a lot of fiction categories in particular. All right, next up, we know that more people are listening via libraries, but also via subscribing to various services. And as I said before, people are listening who are younger. So we have seen a big growth in people under the age of 45 doing listening. That's more than half of the listeners. And people say that audiobooks are great for relaxing. We never believed this as an industry and until we started seeing it again and again on the surveys, but that's true. People like to turn off their screen and listen and really absorb the words. All right, next up, here are some key things about genres that we've seen in the last year. So general fiction is kind of a big catch-all bucket. That's the #1 genre. It takes about 20% of the overall sales. But we saw a little bit of a shift this year. Science fiction and fantasy actually overtook mystery, suspense, thriller, got into that second place, pushing mysteries down into third place. And this is based on dollar spend. So some of it might be from people buying longer titles. But we know that people love science fiction and fantasy, and audio kind of helps when you have a narrator telling you what all the crazy words are. In the fourth category, general nonfiction. And I don't think you'll be surprised by any of this. True in books and in audiobooks, some of the genres that really increased in the past couple of years, specifically romance, self-help, and the science fiction fantasy. All right, I've talked a lot about what's going on in the audiobook world. Now let's talk about LA TheatreWorks. We actually generally record live in front of an audience with sound effects. There's a sound effects artist on stage and music, and recognizable actors who can commit just a week to our process. It does involve rehearsals, unlike most audiobook recording. And we are a nonprofit, so we are doing a lot to make sure that these plays are preserved. So over the past year and a half, we have been recording in studio, but still producing great stuff. And as a nonprofit, we like to support free giveaway programs, including Audiophile's Sync Audiobooks for Teens. We had 2 titles in the program this season, which are both available for sale as well. The first being No No Boy, all about what happened during the aftermath of US government incarceration of people of Japanese descent during World War II. And this starred Greg Watanabe, among other great actors. The other title that we had for Sync this season, and there's a link to Sync right in the PowerPoint here. Sync actually gives away 2 free titles per week to teens throughout the spring and summer. It starts in April, ends in August. You download the Sora app and you can get these great titles, including Paradise. Paradise is part of LA TheatreWorks' Sloan Foundation collection. It's the Relativity series. These are plays about science. And this particular play is about a young woman who is getting into it with her science teacher in a wide variety of different ways. And they have to take a look at their own personal beliefs in the context of science and the classroom. All right, next up, I want to talk a little bit about Setting the Stage for Learning. This is our free program that we offer to middle and high schools in the US. And so if you go to latw.org/education and enroll, there's also a link here that you can click on when you receive the presentation. There you can have a school sign up to receive a selection of plays they get to pick that are delivered as MP3 files, and they can bring audio drama right to the classroom. All right, so we encourage everyone to enroll. Next up, one of my favorites, the Japanese American Civil Liberties collection. This has many plays, including No No Boy, that you should listen to. They're all available as a collection digitally only, although each play is available individually on CD as well. So do check that out. One of the other plays we have from last season that I didn't get to talk about last year was A Good Day at Auschwitz, which is written and starring Stephen Tobolewsky, who wrote the play after meeting this man named Abe at his synagogue, and Abe survived the Holocaust and spent 3 years in Auschwitz. And so the play itself is their conversations, and it stars Alan Mandel as Abe. All right, next up, we've got Later Life. This has some very recognizable names. A.R. Gurney is a fun playwright, and it stars, you might remember David Hyde Pierce if you're of a certain age from Frasier, as well as David Dukes and Judith Ivey. So something to take a listen to. And this one is, again, available only digitally. If you're an Agatha Christie fan or a fan of Alfred Molina or Simon Helberg, this was an Audie-nominated title, and it is a Poirot title. It was adapted for the stage by Kate McCall, and if you like Agatha Christie, I highly, highly recommend it. Next up, we have Franklin Land. This is another of our relativity plays that are about science, and it's actually about Ben Franklin and his son William. And it stars Gregory Harrison and Larry Powell. Our next play is Pipeline. This was commissioned by the Steppenwolf Theater Company in Chicago, and it's all about a teacher who works at inner city schools but sends her own son to a private school. And when he gets kicked out, she has a lot of different things to face. If you are a fan of the classics, by modern classics like Ernest Hemingway's The Sun Also Rises, this is another adaptation that Kate McCall has done for us. It will be coming out in August, and it will be starring Seamus Dever and Herbert Seguenza. Then we have some plays that have not yet been recorded. These are still being recorded in studio at this time, but we are looking forward to being live and in person again in 2023. This is a play about two different couples, one Muslim and Jewish, who are trying to survive war and, of course, marriage. And finally, from our favorite Tom Stoppard, we have Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead. I don't have a cast for this yet, but it is kind of a send-up of Hamlet. If you like what you've seen, we do offer a number of different collections. The drama collection itself has 250 plays. It's over 450 hours of listening. This is a collection on CD, only available direct from LA TheaterWorks. It's 25 different volumes. It's got lots of award-winning plays in it, and we only charge $999 for it. Plus, it comes with free replacements. It has kind of everything you could wish for. Each year, we add to the drama collection. So you can see on the next slide, we have each different year's collection. It runs from about 9 to about 14 plays in the collections. These are $50 each, again, only available direct from LA TheaterWorks. And it includes a lot of the favorite plays. Just as we record them, we do a new collection. The 2021 collection, which has 19 CDs, includes a number of the titles that I have talked about here. I will say we are finding it harder and harder to get CD cases. So get your CDs now, because I don't know how much longer we will be able to sell them. Of course, we are always looking for feedback on what other plays should we add to our collection. Our goal is really to create a full collection of both modern plays and classics. We have our titles available on CD through vendors such as Midwest Tape and Ingram, and then on digital through all your favorites, Hoopla, Biblioteca, Overdrive. So we do encourage you to go ahead and get the titles from the best source for you, with the exception of the drama collection. Those are only available direct. If you have any feedback you want to send or anything that you would like to tell me about what we should record next, my email address is here. And thank you all for listening.
Thank you so much, Michelle. This all sounds wonderful. Next up is Anita Ragnathan. Anita is the Digital Marketing Associate at ECW Press, where she handles digital promotions, audiobook marketing and publicity, and assists the rights director with rights and licensing. In collaboration with acquiring editor Jen Sukfong Lee, she also acquires ECW's Pop Classics series. Take it away, Anita.
Okay, I hope everyone can hear me and see my screen. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm so excited to be speaking about some of the audiobooks ECW Press has released over the last year and some exciting upcoming audiobooks to look forward to. ECW is an independent trade publisher in the East End of Toronto with over 40 years of history. We have a vibrant and completely unique catalog that includes poetry and literary fiction, genre fiction, pop culture, political analysis, sports books, and biographies. Our audiobook program consists of 3 strands. ECW publishes anywhere from 50 to 60 titles per year, and of those titles, we produce a handful in-house and license others. The goal is to have as many ECW books as possible in audio. Accessibility is very important to us. ECW is the only commercial audiobook producer in Canada to offer an accessible audiobook recording program where we ensure that all content from the print book is adapted and recorded for the audiobook. We then make our audiobooks available regularly to Canadian nonprofits who can create Daisy Talking Books, a file format created for blind users from the audio files. We're also very passionate about Canadian literature at ECW, and so we created the Bespeak Audio Editions imprint, which has the mandate of bringing Canadian voices to the world with audiobook editions of some of the country's greatest works of literature, produced in Canada and performed by Canadian actors. And lastly, as an independent publisher, we work very closely with our colleagues in the industry, sharing knowledge and resources and uplifting one another's work where we can. At ECW Audio, we produce audiobooks for other independent publishers, including our sister children's press, Anik, and our friends at Arsenal, Book Hug, Coach House, Touchwood Editions, and others. And now let's talk about some audiobooks. So starting with ECW, this is Field Study, Meditations on a Year at the Herbarium, in which award-winning poet and novelist Helen Humphreys returns to her series of nature meditations in this gorgeously written and illustrated book that takes a deep look at the forgotten world of herbariums and the people who amassed collections of plant specimens in the 19th and 20th centuries. From Emily Dickinson's and Henry David Thoreau's collections to the amateur naturalists whose names are forgotten, but whose collections still grace our world, herbariums are the records of the often humble plants that are still with us, and also those that are lost. Over the course of a year, Humphreys considers life and loss and the importance of finding solace in and appreciating the nature that still remains with us. All the illustrations in this book and archival photographs are described in accessible audio. I'm also going to be sharing audio clips with you today.
The road to my particular herbarium, the Fowler Herbarium, winds through forest, twisting like a river, each turn revealing something new and surprising. A rafter of wild turkeys in the woods, deer browsing on the underbrush, a glittering icy pond fringed with rushes, and once a fox, nose down, snouting the snowy furrows of a winter field.
Next is Flower Diary, which is the history of the trailblazing artist Mary Heaster Reid. Born into a patrician American family in the middle of the 19th century, Mary was determined to be a painter and enter the art world of men. After she married fellow artist George Reid, she returned with him to his home country of Canada. There, she set about creating over 300 stunning still life and landscape paintings, inhabiting a rich, if sometimes difficult marriage, coping with a younger rival, exhibiting internationally, and becoming very well reviewed. She's a woman ahead of her time, having studied in Paris, traveled to Spain, and divided her time between Canada and the United States, where she lived among America's arts and crafts movement titans. Celebrated poet and biographer Molly Peacock uses her poet skills to create a structurally inventive portrait of this absolutely incredible woman, weaving threads of her own marriage with Heaster Reid's. Narrator Alicia Payne fantastically captures both Mary and Molly's lives and their art with a warmth and lovely cadence that shines through.
It was a challenge to throw away watercolors and enter the world of oils. Following a course so separate from familiar occupations would make any person feel forlorn. but the lack of immediate family made a radical decision possible for Mary. No father to put his foot down, no mother to disapprove, no sister to be shocked. It was a challenge.
Under an Outlaw Moon is based on the true story of Depression-era bank robbers Benny and Stella Mae Dixon. The two young lovers meet in a whirlwind romance that leads to marriage and money woes. Setting his sights on the good life, Benny convinces Stella to rob a bank, as you do. They pull it off, but the score is small and the money doesn't last very long. Planning a bigger robbery, the couple have no idea what's in store for them. After J. Edgar Hoover finds out that they cross state lines, he declares them public enemies number 1 and 2, wanted dead or alive, and so the manhunt ensues. Narrator Patrick Garrow's gravelly voice is perfect for this on-the-run romp. He had a lot of fun with this book, and you can tell.
Benny Dixon had been feeding lines to the pretty blonde, this Stella Mae. Now he was getting caught up in it. Laid it on pretty thick, saying he was a prize fighter in training. That part was true. Johnny O'Malley was the name he used when he stepped through the ropes. Not sure why he used the name on her. The name the promoter had come up with, telling Benny it gave him the Irish edge, a young fighter showing promise, along with a punishing right hook. Something they could build on.
I love that performance. Next is 54 Pigs. Dr. Peter Bannerman is an odd duck, somewhat like our author Philip Schott. He's obsessed with logic and measurable facts, an obsession he puts to good use in his veterinary practice. When his friend Tom becomes a prime suspect in a murder connected to a swine barn explosion, Peter feels compelled to put his reasoning skills and his dog Pippin's remarkable nose, the cutest sidekick in this book, to use to help clear him. This is a very lighthearted mystery with an incredible sense of place, and it's the perfect audiobook for cozy mystery lovers.
Peter heard it before he saw it. A deep, percussive thud from somewhere ahead and to the left, beyond Balderson's woodlot, loud enough to be heard over the rattle of the truck on the washboard gravel, unexpected enough to startle him. His immediate thought was that it sounded like something massive had been dropped from a great height. Whoomp! Like a whale or a cement truck. Peter heard it before.
And now we move on to Bespeak. So earlier this month, Saugeen First Nation in Manitoba discovered 190 potential unmarked graves at the former residential school in Fort Alexander. This after hundreds of unmarked graves have been discovered at residential school sites across Canada since last year. The Canadian settler colonial state forced more than 150,000 First Nations, Inuit, and Métis children to attend residential schools between the late 1800s all the way until the 1990s. These children were stripped of their languages and culture, separated from family, and subjected to psychological, physical, and sexual abuse. Thousands of children are believed to have died while attending these institutions. The Education of Augie Marasti is a courageous and intimate memoir that tells the story of a retired fisherman and trapper who sometimes lived rough on the streets, Augie Marasti, who recounts his experience at one of these schools and shares that these schools did more than attempt to mold children in the ways of white society. They were taught to be ashamed of their heritage as he experienced, and as he experienced, he often suffered from abuse as well. But even as he looks back on this painful part of his childhood, Marasti's sense of humor and warm voice shine through. This book was a national bestseller in 2015 and became available in audio this March. Narration is from Cree actor Lorne Cardinal, who plays Bill on the phenomenal show Rutherford Falls.
Around the 26th of August, 1935, my father decided it was time for us kids to be taken to Sturgeon Landing by canoe, which was propelled by a 4-horsepower motor. It took several days to get there on the river. We had to reckon with a dozen rough rapids and 8 portages. 2 or 3 of those were about 3/4 of a mile long, with thousands of black flies and mosquitoes to fight all the way. Around the
Next is On Opium. Author Carlin Zwarenstein describes her use of opioid-inspired medicines to cope with a painful disease. Evoking both Thomas de Quincey and Frida Kahlo, she travels from the decadence of recreational drug use in past eras to the misery and privation of the overdose crisis today. And along the way, she exposes causes of drug-related harms, including the debilitating effects of poverty, isolation, and trauma, the role of race, class, and gender in addressing pain, and a system of prohibition that has converted age-old medicines into taboo substances. Through all of this, Swerenstein finds hope, drawing on solidarity between illicit drug users and people in pain, in a wise understanding of what humans need to be well, and in radical drug policies like legalization and safe supply. She lays out a vision of a world where suffering is no longer lauded and opioids are no longer demonized. Our audiobook manager, Cassie Smith, was at the first manuscript reading with the narrator, Christine Horn, after which she immediately messaged the rest of the audiobook team at ECW and said that this book would be really special, and it truly is.
It might have started when I first noticed myself lurching stiffly as I walked, in the sleepless weeks after my first child was born, or earlier when back pain plagued me at my desk job. Or maybe the story only really begins when I was first diagnosed, years after that. But I'd rather start this story a little later, when after some years of being clawed constantly by stiffness and pain, I began trying to claw back the life pain took from me. It's my story, so I get to choose.
Now we have a couple of audiobooks that are coming out this fall. The first is Dandelion by Chaimi Chai Yun Louis. When protagonist Lily was 11 years old, her mother Sui Hua walked away from the family, never to be seen or heard from again. Now, a new mother herself, Lily becomes obsessed with finding out what happened to her own mother. While Lily's family is stubbornly silent to her questioning, an old family friend provides a clue that sends Lily to Southeast Asia to find out the truth. Dandelion is a beautifully written and affecting novel about motherhood, family secrets, migration, isolation, and mental illness. With clarity and care, it delves into the many ways we define home, identity, and above all, belonging. This is definitely going to be a captivating listen. Book of Wings traces a global journey from Vancouver to the United States, the Caribbean, Paris, and Morocco, as the relationship with the protagonist's lover and travel partner disintegrates, and she finds herself on a path towards personal discovery and spiritual fulfillment that leads her deep into the North African landscape. In this sweeping, elusive novel, the celebrated poet, dervish, and oral storyteller Tawhida Tanya Evanson comes to terms with what it means to stand on one's own 2 feet in an uncertain world. I highly recommend you check out Tawhida's work. And lastly, we have a book from our friends at Coach House. This is The Sleeping Car Porter, which traces the journey of a porter named Baxter on a train trip out west that becomes particularly unruly. While the train is stalled for 2 extra days, the secrets of the passengers start to leak out and blur with the sleep deprivation hallucinations that Baxter is having. When he finds a postcard of 2 queer men, Baxter's memories and longings are reawakened. Keeping the postcard puts his job in peril, but he can't part with it or his thoughts of Edwin Drew, porter instructor. The Sleeping Car Porter brings to life an important part of Black history in North America from the perspective of a queer man living in a culture that renders him invisible in 2 ways. Affecting, imaginative, and visceral enough that you'll feel the rocking of the train, The Sleeping Car Porter is a stunning accomplishment. And for those interested in learning more about this period of history, I would highly recommend the CBC show, The Porter. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anita. Those clips just are so wonderful to give that little bit of insight into the what the book as a whole is going to be. Next up is Angie Cornett. Angie is the Vice President of Graphic Audio LLC, a division of RB Media. She has worked in the audiobook industry for over 30 years and has worked in various roles, including recording engineer, director of marketing, acquisitions and production, and general manager. She currently focuses on acquisitions, including developing original stories, and general manages graphic audio. During her career, she has never shied away from technology, overseeing the building and launch of Graphic Audio's e-commerce stores, as well as Graphic Audio's Access app. She has an MBA from the George Washington University and a BFA from Carnegie Mellon University. She is a second-degree black belt in Taekwondo and enjoys writing music and screenplays in her spare time. To which I say, what spare time? It sounds like you have quite the docket. Thanks for being here, Angie.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. So I'm going to play a clip of what graphic audio is next.
Graphic audio. A movie in your mind.
Experience a radically different audiobook. With a full cast of characters, cinematic music, and sound effects. Let our dramatized adaptations transport you. If you're driving cross-country, working out at the gym, or flying in a plane, graphic audio will take you places no ordinary audiobook or podcast dares. Choose from over 1,500 titles from over 150 series. How does it feel? This is intense.
I've never felt anything like this before.
It's like I'm entering another dimension.
It feels like I'm in the middle of the action. So how do I get more graphic audio titles?
Purchase graphic audio downloads at graphicaudio.net, where you can earn redeemable points with the Loyalty Rewards program. Download or stream directly onto your devices with our free Graphic Audio Access app, available on all Android and Apple devices. So you can listen to graphic audio anytime, anywhere. Graphic audio, a movie in your mind.
Next. So I'm going to go through a few mythbusters about graphic audio. So you can see, we are a little different. We have a dynamic narrator, full cast, cinematic, and sound effects to move the action along the story. A lot of libraries wonder, why should I have this audiobook if I already have a similar version unabridged? The difference is that we also have 1,000 unique titles, and it's two different experiences. We have 300 titles that are exclusive to graphic audio. Several of them are originals, and we do comic book adaptations that are in no other format for audio. So we do work with a variety of authors. You can see Brandon Sanderson, Peter Pratt, Sarah J. Maas, Charlene Harris, Elena Andrews, and so on. And we do work with a variety of brands, Dark Horse, Vault Comics, Dynamite, and more. Next. So I'm going to go through some of the titles that we've got coming out. We are known for series publishing. We have just launched this year, Court of Thorns and Roses, by Sarah J. Maas, and it is performed by full cast. Sarah was very involved with this production, and this is, as many of you probably know, as a retelling of Beauty and the Beast and the Scottish folk tale Tam Lin. And so we've got this great character, Farah, and there's always a love triangle, and in this case there is, with two beasts. And so it's all the adventures that happen with Farah, and then it moves on to her sisters. So we've got A Court of Wings and Ruin coming up soon. We're publishing A Court of Mist and Fury this summer. Next. This is the Innkeeper Chronicle. So this is an inn that it's a living entity in itself. Dina DeMille is the innkeeper, and she has to protect the galactic tyrant and any guests that come and stay at the inn. There is a love triangle here as well. So paranormal romance is one of our favorite things to do. Of course, werewolves, vampires, shapeshifters, those are all fun to portray. And in this case, she has a love triangle with a vampire from outer space and a werewolf. And then we go on, and in book 4, which is coming up soon, we've got a little bit of a twist there with a different innkeeper. Next. This is one of my favorites. It's Ordinary Magic by Devin Monk. Think Gilmore Girls in the town of Ordinary Oregon. This is where gods, Greek gods, get to lay down their powers for an entire year. They can become hardware store salespeople, bakeries, bank tellers, whatever, for a whole year and live just quietly. And the three sisters that run the town keep the law. They protect the residents from any evil, such as demons, vampires, and the such. And so this is one of my favorite fun series called Ordinary Magic. Next. This is Souls of the Road. This is new for us, and this is also written by Devin Monk. Here we've got two lovers, Lula and Brogren Gouge. They have dealt with magic monsters and gods for 80 years. They're stuck on the lonely roads of Route 66 trying to break a curse. And so this is their story. Next. The Ryria Chronicles series by Michael J. Sullivan. We have previously done the Legends of the First Empire, and we've done Ryria Revelations. We've done the prequel and the sequel. This is the middle, where we get to meet the two characters that pretty much are the heroes of Ryria Revelations. They hate each other. So this is great because we kind of find out how they come to be and how they kind of take everything to the end and finish this entire saga. Next. So here's another mythbuster about graphic audio. Are these productions abridged? Well, yes, we are. We take out the he said, she said. If there's a battle scene or a thunderstorm or whatever, we do that with music and sound effects and Foley work. And we call them red shirts. They basically do the noises and the sounds. And so, yes, these productions are slightly abridged, about 25% abridged from the unabridged version of a book. Next. This is the Ketherian Gamut. So this is got a great character, Bethany Ann. Bethany Ann voiced the entire Ketherian Gambit in the unabridged series for LMBPN. We were fortunate that she wanted to work with us as well. So she is an Army captain that goes into a science. Well, we don't know what it is exactly, but it does come from not here, out of space. And she comes out of this room totally a vampire that is one of the strongest vampires there is. She keeps the factions together with werewolves and vampires. And so everything you knew about werewolves and vampires is very different in this story. Next. This is one of our own originals. It's called Tangent Night by Christopher Golden. It is the art of tokusatsu, I'm saying that wrong, tokusatsu style action. So it's similar to like Kamen Rider, fans of Super Sentai, Power Rangers would love this. It's a coming of age for Kori Kagami, who gets caught in a big explosion at her mother's work, and it ends up she inherits these powers. And so this is all about her learning about herself. This is the Deathlands. So if you like The Walking Dead and Mad Max Road Warrior, this is a combination. This is our longest running series. We are up to 146 titles and going. We're still writing these and publishing them, and we have a very solid fan base for these. It's a group of survivors going through a post-apocalyptic America, and they're portaling through like Stargate. And they're dealing with barren land barons and zombies and creepies and all kinds of things. It's one of our favorite series. Next. And we love to do Westerns. So we have a lot of Westerns by William W. Johnstone and J.A. Johnstone. We've got over 300 Westerns, a variety of other writers too, but these are ones we're featuring for this summer. First Mountain Man series, 27 features Carnage, McAllister series, 11, Savage Sunday, Wilt Tanner, 7, The Violent Storm. These all have a little bit of mystery, thriller, romance, and just a good old action adventure. Next. Vampire Hunter D series. This is our big manga series. There's 20 books in this. This was translated from the Japanese, from Dark Horse. And he's a Dampier, and he's so half vampire, half human. And it's kind of imagining Clint Eastwood as a vampire in a Western. So all these are fun, sort of Western adventures with the Dhampir that goes and keeps the peace, and the nobility are bad vampires that have sort of brainwashed the humans with technology from outer space so that they don't know how to kill these vampires. Next. Mythbusters about graphic audio. Do you only produce comic books and graphic novels? No, we do not. 95% of our titles are prose-based, full-length novels. And we publish many genres, as I mentioned before: paranormal romance, fantasy, science fiction, Western, mystery, action, adventure, and horror. Next. We are working with Arkham Horror. This series is sort of, if you are a fan of Agatha Christie, you would love these series. This title, they match up with the card game, and they all have different mysteries surrounding each, with a group of people trying to solve them. Next. The Boys. If you're a fan of The Boys, which is now on Amazon Prime, season 3, this is The Boys, Dear Becky, that was actually based on the television series. We've also done the original The Boys, volumes 1 through 6, that collect the entire comic book collection, and ours is true to the comic books, not like Hollywood. And so that's all available on graphic audio. Next. We also have done the X series by Dark Horse. This is sort of like, he's kind of like Batman and Punisher. I think he's a little daredevilish myself. He's a little bit of vigilante, trying to set things straight in the cities. And so we have done 6 episodes collecting 24 issues. Next. And upcoming, we have Horror County, which is an Eisner-nominated fantasy horror that is coming out in graphic audio by Cullen Bunn and Tyler Crook. It's all about Emmy, who knows that there's ghosts and monsters around the woods where she lives, but she doesn't really realize how she's tied into it until her 18th birthday. And then the second half, kind of, she comes to an epic confrontation there. And we're looking forward to releasing that right around Halloween. Next. And this is where we're very excited about this. Mike Mignola, the creator of Hellboy, is excited about this. Christopher Golden, who we worked with before. We've got 3 original Hellboys coming out. The first one's Plague of Wasps, and Hellboy is in Brazil and an archaeological dig with his girlfriend, and there's these wasps, and it's a whole mystery. It's fun. And finally, The Traitor. The Traitor is also comes from the Deathland series, and it's also a very, very fun series, learning the origins of Traitor, who's a big character in our Deathland. I think that's it. So thank you all for your time. We are available through all libraries, Overdrive, Hoopla, Bibliotheca, and much more. And so if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Thank you.
Thank you, Angie. What a great collection. Our final presenter today will be Leah Kleinhenz. Leah is an award-winning audiobook producer and chief operating officer at Deyan Audio, the world's largest independent audiobook production company. She splits her time between producing incredible audiobooks for multinational publishers and independents, drinking too much coffee, and continuously working to make Deyan Audio's production services the best in class. Take it away, Leah.
Thank you so much for that introduction. Hi, my name is Leah Kleinhenz, as she mentioned, and I'm a senior producer here at Deyan Audio. I'm also the chief operating officer, but that's the boring part of my job. Today, I'm here to talk about something much more exciting, which is accessibility in audiobooks, both how accessible audiobooks are made and why it matters, which is an especially timely topic, given the great presentations you've just heard from ECW and Graphic Audio and all of my colleagues here today. But first, to give you a little background on Deyan, we are the world's largest independent audiobook production company. And if you're thinking, that's weird, I've never heard of you, that's because Deyan is a production-only organization. That means we don't buy rights, publish books, distribute books, or offer any services other than audiobook production. As a result, while we worked on our fair share of Grammy, Audie, Odyssey, Earphone, and other award-winning titles, you're probably never going to see the name Leah Kleinhenz etched onto the trophy or in the credits of the book. But that's all part of who Deyan is. Our only goal is to create great audiobooks for our clients, whether those clients are multinational publishers or independent authors. And we really love what we do. Can I have the next slide, please? So before getting into the accessibility part of my presentation, I wanted to start by sharing a little bit of the common terminology and process with all of you. If we were in person right now, I would say, put up your hand if you know what QCing is. But since we're not in person, I'm just going to be condescending, sorry, and assume that at least some of you haven't heard that word before. And that's because audiobook production is, at its absolute most basic, a 34-step process. And each step of that process has its own name and weird jargon. But I've broken it down here into 3 catch-all phases and substeps within those categories. The first phase is pre-production. This is where we have the pleasure of talking with the author, auditioning the narrators, and ultimately casting the book. We also prep the recording materials such as the script, credits, and word list. The second phase is production. This is when the book gets recorded and the audio is processed for editing. The final phase is post-production. This is the most technical phase and the one that includes the most jargon. But in its simplest form, it's comprised of editing the book together, QCing or performing quality control on the book to check for errors, and recording pickups, otherwise known as corrections, and eventually finally mastering the files to make sure they sound beautiful when people access the audiobook from your library. Can I have the next slide, please? So what is an accessible audiobook? And what makes it different from any other kind of audiobook? Well, the definition of an accessible audiobook is always changing as the industry grows and adapts to this new market. But generally speaking, I would define an accessible audiobook as a product that captures and conveys the material on the printed page with as little information loss as possible, so that any audio reader can have the same experience as a print reader. And now you might be wondering, what exactly is a print disability? Simply put, it's a disability that limits a person's ability to consume written material. The obvious example is visual impairment or blindness, but a print disability can be much more than that. In my own life, I see examples of print disabilities all around me. My father has dyslexia, which makes reading off the page a slow and frustrating process for him. My mother has arthritis, which makes holding a hardcover copy of the newest Brandon Sanderson tome a bit of a challenge. My friend has severe migraines that cause visual auras and make reading a painful experience. And I have ADHD and live in LA, which means I spend hours sitting in traffic and would undoubtedly make a lot of questionable decisions if I didn't have an audiobook to distract me. At the end of the day, as a producer, creating an accessible audiobook is a whole lot of asking how. How am I going to adapt that written element into audio form? How am I going to make sure the information on the printed page is making it to the listener? How am I going to make sure the product is accessible, but also enjoyable? And how am I going to make sure I'm listening to feedback and creating something that the listener actually needs and not just what I think a listener should need? I won't pretend there are perfect solutions to every question yet, but we have made huge advancements in the right direction. And a great example of that is graphic novel adaptation. Can I have the next slide, please? If you take Andrews McNeil's graphic novel, Anne of Green Gables, for example, when you look at the spreads in a graphic novel like this, your immediate thought might be, this will never work in audio, or why not just listen to the audiobook of the actual novel? It has Canadian sensation Rachel McAdams. But as an eternal optimist, I like to try and go beyond that kind of thinking. Just because someone with a print disability could listen to the novel doesn't mean they shouldn't be able to also enjoy the graphic novel. A young person with a print disability isn't necessarily going to enjoy Canadian fiction from the earliest 20th century, after all, but they might enjoy a graphic novel adaptation of the work. So how do we pull that off? Next slide, please. The first step that we add into the pre-production phase is script adaptation. There's a couple different ways to do this, but generally it just means this is where someone sits down and creates a written script of the graphic novel. In the case of a nonfiction text with a handful of images, you might write that out in a more academic way with image alt text describing each image in detail. But for a graphic novel, we go through each panel and create notes on how we're going to either have the narrator read the image, so to speak, or use sound effects to convey the image. As you can see for this particular book, the publisher chose to use a full cast of narrators for the book. That means the person reading the narration for text such as Mrs. Lind could always tell when something was afoot is not the same narrator reading Mrs. Lind's dialogue. And thank goodness I was not one of those narrators. This technique is also sometimes employed when differentiating footnotes from the main narration of the text in nonfiction books. And once we have a full written script, we have the narrators come in and record their parts, and then it's off to post-production. While the post-production process, oh, sorry, can I have the next slide, please? While the post-production process, which is this, starts similarly with the editing, QC, and pickup process, once we get to sound effects, the process starts to change. Using specialized software, we then go through the script and highlight every piece of the text that needs a sound effect and flag it for the mastering engineer. The mastering engineer uses these flags to put together a library of sound effects and can see exactly where to insert them through the text. The end result is a whole new subset of audiobooks that take text previously inaccessible to readers with a print disability and provides a way for all readers to enjoy the content. And this doesn't just apply to graphic novels, even if that is a particularly fun example. Can I have the next slide, please? Many of the books you see here utilize some element of accessible audio practices, whether that's multicast narration, a graphic novel adaptation, a book that incorporates footnotes into the text, an orated link to the reference material in the book, or sound effects that are conveying the printed material. And like making medical advancements by going to the moon, the process of learning to make accessible audiobooks has also pushed audiobook production to grow in other important ways as we listen to feedback from readers and incorporate that into our work. From representing BIPOC and LGBTQ+ voices on the page to reflecting the diversity in the voices that are cast to narrate the text, audiobooks can be another useful tool for connecting people to their own identity and to one another. I don't think anyone on this particular webinar needs to be told how powerful books can be when it comes to shaping the future, and ensuring that that material is accessible to all readers is another step in the right direction for creating the world we ultimately want to live in. So while we could stop at saying, if people want to read Anne of Green Gables, they're just going to have to listen to the novel, instead, we choose to continue striving toward a world where readers can access all material in a way that meets their needs, no matter what those needs are. Last slide, please. And that's it. As you can see, this is my last slide. And if you or your patrons are interested in learning more about accessible audiobooks or audiobook production in general, again, my name is Leah and I am a huge audiobook nerd. So please feel free to reach out at any time to the email on the screen, and I will be very happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Leah. That was fascinating information, and I sure did learn a lot. We have a few minutes for questions, so if you do have a question, go ahead and pop it in the Q&A box down there. While we're waiting to see if any questions come in, I will let you know that tomorrow all attendees will receive an email containing links to today's video recording, slide presentation, title list, and a certificate of completion. For more about Booklist webinars, be sure to visit booklistonline.com/webinars, where you can view archives of past webinars and register for upcoming ones like those that you see here. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions coming in, so we will continue on. If you are not yet a subscriber, pair the print reading experience with the convenience of online access at booklistonline.com, and you can lock in print, online, digital, and archive access by taking advantage of this special webinar offer to get Booklist for only $75. Patron friendly, librarian approved, and free with your Booklist subscription. Booklist Reader, Booklist's new digital only magazine highlighting diverse readers advisory recommendations for all ages, has arrived. To see and share the latest issue, visit booklistonline.com/reader-issues. We are very excited to share Booklist, book links, and Booklist Reader. And we recently joined the Overdrive Magazines program in partnership with Zinio, and they are available for your patrons to read in Libby. July is Read Graphic Month here at Booklist, and this year we are going bigger than ever. Check out the Booklist blog to enter our sweepstakes, register for our graphic novels webinars, including a presentation about comics and censorship with the ALA Graphic Novels and Comics Roundtable Committee, listen to our Read Graphic playlist on our YouTube channel, and of course, read this year's Guide to Graphic Novels issue, which is focusing on all things manga. I also want to add that the July issue will have audiobooks, graphic novel audiobooks covered with a trend alert on that topic as well. All right, I'm still not seeing any more questions coming in, so we're going to wrap it up here. Thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar. One more huge thank you to our panelists, Michelle, Anita, Angie, and Leah, and to our sponsors, LA Theater Works, ECW Press, and Graphic Audio. This concludes today's webinar. See you next time.